Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to our professional development series. Today we have Michael Wilson here, who will be discussing financial planning. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me in the chat. And as always, please try and keep your mic muted when you're not talking.
Oh, good morning. Thank you, Lindsay. Today we are going to talk about a topic that's near and dear to my heart and something that I pay very close attention to in my own personal life. And it's the idea of financial planning. Just watching the flow of money in and out and making sure always that I spend less than I make. Let's face it, things are not going to work for you to reach any type of goals if you're spending more than you make. And it's actually easy to do with the way that credit flows freely in our economy. It's easy to put things on a credit card and make minimum monthly payments to stretch out your cash flow even further. So what I'd like to talk about is share with you guys a PowerPoint slide on a 6-cup model of financial planning. And basically, most models like this are just designed to help you make sure you understand the components of where your money is coming from and where it's going to. And so with that, I'm going to share my screen, and then we're going to get into some details here. All right. When we start talking about financial planning, we're talking about the concept of taking a look at our own expenses on an individual basis and making sure that we're planning for the types of activities that we would like to be able to do, as well as covering our basic needs and necessities. So again, a definitional piece. I think the second bullet point is just very easy to get to, no matter what your age. And the third point is something that I think would benefit a number of people, but it is often not practiced. Okay. When we think of managers at many of these large companies, you can recognize that's what managers are doing. They are managing their expenses, and it's one of the ways they're being evaluated. So again, we talked about the 6-cup model, and the idea is that there are total cash flows that come in, either from you at work and the wages, consulting fees, or whatever that you may bring in, as well as your assets that may be at work. Now, for the vast majority of first-generation people, assets at work is a topic that doesn't always come into play, but what it means is things like investments that are producing dividends or interest, or inheritance that provides a cash flow or access to funds. If you're blessed to have assets at work, I recognize it as another important source of funding, but as I like to tell many people, my parents gave me the great gift of poverty. That gift required me to work much harder than I otherwise would if I just had assets at work. And I'm sure many of you guys may be in the same boat. Eventually in time, your assets at work will come into play. So what we're doing here is recognizing that our cash flow is going to be used up on things that are consumption oriented. And there's a lot of discretion that we have in what we consider consumption. Hopefully some of it is also going to go towards savings. Some of it's going to go towards insurance to protect ourselves. Some of it is going to be saved for education or dedicated to education. If any of you guys are planning on having children, the cost of college is very expensive. And the earlier you start saving for their education, the better off you'll be. And finally, the last piece, retirement and investment. There's a difference between the two. Retirement is our savings that we're trying to save for our retirement, and investments are our excess cash at work for us producing assets. Okay. we recognize there's some necessities that we have: food, shelter, and clothing. Those necessities are going to be things that all of us need. All of us are going to have to be prepared to eventually cover those costs for ourselves. In addition, there's extracurricular activities. What are your hobbies? What are the things you enjoy doing? Perhaps that is biking or fishing like me, or it could be other things for different people. There's also a number of bills that we have to pay. And this is why it's important to really track, as well as look for ways to manage these costs down. That's going to be the second part of this presentation, where I'm actually going to go through a monthly budget and see if we can identify some areas that we could cut some costs. When it comes to insurance, there's a number of things that we're required to have insurance on, whether it's ourselves, our cars, life insurance if we have loved ones that we want to protect. Also, rental insurance can come into play, and it can be a very important protector of yourself. One of the things about rental insurance, for those of you guys who are just starting out, the cost is relatively low and the benefit can be significant, right? There's a number of renters out there. The cost of a policy isn't that high. Maybe it's, it's definitely under $100 a year, but it can be significant if your neighbor, for example, leaves the tub running and there's water damage all throughout your place. Okay, a couple of reasons why we need savings. One, for emergencies as well as major expenses, whether they're car payments, whether it's car repairs, car payments in the sense of saving for a new car, or perhaps a down payment on a house. So savings, I like to say, is not fun, but it is incredibly important for you guys to think about that as soon as possible. Okay, when it comes to education, you guys, if you're planning to have children or you're blessed with children, paying for school is significant. And while paying for college is something I think we should all prepare for, there also may be tutoring sessions or other activities that are considered to be part of education, whether it's your own personal development and training, that are important considerations and should be considered as part of the budget. Okay, when it comes to retirement, you guys may have noticed a tax filter on that first picture that I showed you guys. And that tax filter basically says everything has to be considered after tax. It's your money after you pay taxes that's available for you. The one exception is retirement money, because when you contribute to your own retirement through a program like a 401k program, you are actually shielding that money from the tax man until you retire. Now, some of you may be blessed eventually when you do end up working. You may be blessed to find out that you're a beneficiary of a defined benefit plan. Now, these plans are really hard to find now, but some of the government agencies have long histories. It used to be a lot of major companies had long histories. And what a defined benefit plan is where the benefit is defined. The language of a defined benefit plan usually reads something like, you'll be able to collect 75% of your high five salary after you work 30 years. So those plans, the organization is making the investment decisions, setting aside money and making a promise to pay you some defined amount. That made life a lot easier for many of us. Those days are definitely on the decline. And what's more popular is a program like a defined benefit program like an IRA or 401k. many companies have elected to just match your contributions. So the contribution is defined. The company will say, we will match 50% of your first 6% that you set aside. Essentially, they'll match how much, they'll match 3% of your salary. And whereas the benefit is defined in a defined benefit plan, we're going to give you 75%. In a defined contribution, the contribution is defined. Each year will contribute X amount to your account. That does two things. One, it places the burden and the responsibility of investing on you, the employee, and the company is getting out of the business of saving for you. So there's a lot of things that we need to keep in mind when it comes to this new world of defined contribution plans. One of the things that I'm going to recommend you guys consider is that you consider index funds and being what I consider to be a passive investor, where you don't try to beat the market, but you just try to be the market. Why is that significant? It's significant because research has shown that 75% of the managers out there who advertise their funds don't actually beat the market year over year. So you've got a pretty good chance with the index fund of being the market and performing better than a lot of the funds that are out there. So an index fund also has low fees, low trading cost. Those fees and costs really can add up and take a bite into your return. Let's say there was a hotshot manager who produced a 10% return on your savings, but his fees were 3%. So after fees, you earned 7%, while the market performed at 8%. So the 10% may feel good, but the 10% didn't beat the market. So index funds are worth your consideration. Just Google that, try and understand what's happening there. Most of you guys will, the majority of folks will have defined contribution plans, not defined benefit plans. Okay. The other piece here is that when it comes to investments, again, some people get an early start on investing, probably at the expense of other categories. When we use the term investing, we're not talking about saving for retirement. We're talking about trying to make money in the different markets that are available. You guys may know people who tried to buy cryptocurrencies, or people who got a hot stock tip and wanted to put some money in there. One of the things I've learned over time is that it's really, really hard to hit a home run on investments, and being slow and steady is probably a better way to approach it. But most important in the context of financial planning is we got to get our financial house in order to have money that's available to invest. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over and talk about an example for a young person who's starting out in the professional career. And we're going to spend some time in trying to make sure we understand just some of the important choices that you guys can make in order to get you guys in the right frame of mind. So if there's any questions, I'll take those now. Otherwise, I'll share my screen again, and we'll go through an Excel spreadsheet next. Excuse me.
One question here: what percentage of the monthly income do you recommend to set aside for emergency?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think many of the pros say 3 to 6 months of your income should be set aside in savings for these emergencies. I have a tendency to think, though, that's a little high, but I'm never going to suggest people save less, right? A monthly emergency, the things like a car repair. Many of you guys know that most car repairs, you bring your car in, something's the matter, it's $1,000 all day long, right? So we're dealing in a world where these costs are increasing, and the types of things that can cause you trouble can be significant. On a 3 to 6, let's say a 3-month savings amount, we're going to use an example of somebody making $55,000. That's about 12 to, it's probably 12 to $15,000 to have saved. And who knows what that could be. It could be a bad travel experience. It could be an emergency loan helping somebody out. It could be a repair that you need. That's always a good way to solve some of the problems instead of it coming out of your monthly check or it going on a credit card where an interest rate might be 18 or 20%. So these savings accounts are huge. 3 to 6 months is a kind of rule of thumb measure that many people use. Okay. Yeah, that question about getting a credit card, I think the answer to that is yes. And as a high school student, they may be more challenging to get. I think Mike and I realized that life has changed significantly. It was very difficult to get a credit card when we were growing up. I mean, you had to have years of employment. I remember the first credit card I received was a $300 credit limit, but I had to put $300 up in their savings account before they would let me use a credit card for $300. What's happened is those days are kind of over with where credit is that tight. You'll notice that you may even in the high school level get offers for credit cards. And what credit card companies have figured out is that if we jack the interest rates up really high and keep those interest rates pretty high, we can cover the losses of people who won't be able to pay. What does that mean? At the end of the day, it's possible, I think, for a young person to get a credit card, but please, please use that card wisely. It's one of the first ways that you start to build a credit rating. It's an important way for you to build that, and it has to be managed well. It's not going to do you any good to buy things on credit and not make those payments. You're digging yourself a hole. So those questions are very important, and I think they are more available than they were certainly when I was coming up. They may not be exactly easy to get, but they get to know who you are as soon as you start to make purchases and become part of the grid, let's call it. So you may get an offer for that.
If I can interject really quick, I think something that's important to know about credit cards is just because you have a $500 limit doesn't mean that you should max your card out, because credit companies are going to look at that. If you're constantly maxed out every single month, then they're going to assume that you're at risk, and usually your credit score will lower because of that.
Important point. Thanks for sharing, Lindsay. That's absolutely true. Okay, I'm going to jump over to a Excel spreadsheet, and then we're going to talk this through. Can you guys see this okay? Is there a... See if I can make that a little bit bigger. Here's what I did in preparation for today. Is I assumed that a young person just starting out has received a starting salary of $55,000. And then I ran that salary through a tool called Paycheck City, and I asked the site to tell me how much would that person take home after they made the proper withholdings for federal and state taxes. I think there was another piece here that I missed, but these numbers are close. On gross wages of $4,583 per month, that's the total of $55,000 per year. You would have roughly $587 withheld to make sure your taxes were even at the end of the year, that you would withhold enough to pay your taxes off at the end of the year. In addition, you'd have Social Security. Most of you guys should recognize that. You pay into the Social Security Trust Fund. When you get to retirement age, you're able to take that out. You're also required to pay into Medicare. Social Security and Medicare are paid by the employer. Half is paid by the employer, half is paid by the employee. And this provides your medical insurance once you hit 65. We also assume that this young person was going to take advantage of a 401k savings plan and save 5% of their salary. That translates to $229 a month. Okay, well, this is where it gets fun. If that's the case, and you're bringing home $3,416 each month, what would it look like to live in Minneapolis, and how much could you expect to spend? Let's start with the very first question, which are shelter question. I think the average rents are $1,400 or $1,500 a month. If you wanted to live, say, downtown somewhere or uptown or one of these fancy neighborhoods, it would not surprise me for you to be paying $1,500 a month, maybe for 700 or 800 square feet. That's current market rate, right? Because what some people do is they celebrate the fact that they've got a nice paying job and they're ready to demonstrate to the world that they got it going on, right? So that's an easy one to find places that meet what you consider to be needs. What's a need? For my oldest daughter, she had to have a laundry in her room. You generally only get that with newer buildings. Generally, newer buildings are going to be expensive. That's just an example. Then the next thing is utilities. By the time you put your cell phone together with cable cost and whatever heat and electricity costs, that easily can reach $300 per month. You guys with me on that? At some point, then, you're going to think about maybe transportation. Maybe you need a car. One of the ways we can translate that into monthly amounts is that if you went out and bought a new car for $25,000, generally you're going to pay about $400, $500 for that car, depending on how much you put down. So a new car would cost you, along with the gas, let's say cost you for $500. The next item, how often do you go to the grocery store? Many people go weekly. The basic stuff that you buy easily could come to $100. One of the areas that money kind of seeps out and through is when you dine out. That coffee that you get at Starbucks, the lunch, going out with friends, the tips that are involved, that could easily be $100 a week. Then you have clothing, and some of you guys maybe clothe horses or like to shop, but in general, as you're starting your career, there'll be some money spent on clothing, dry cleaning, things like that. Then you pick the hobby. Maybe it's a gym membership. Maybe it's whatever your hobby might be, you're going to spend probably some money in that activity. Then, of course, there's insurance, medical, dental, car insurance. And then you'll notice that there's not anything left over for education. There's not anything left over for investing. And in fact, you're spending more than you brought in. And it puts us in a negative position. There are many, many people in this situation. How do they do it? Is a question you might ask. Well, the way many people do it is by putting many of these purchases on a credit card, and they carry a credit card balance, which is one of the ways you just get involved what we call the credit card trap, right? All right, so this is something for you guys to think about. What are the ways that you could look at these costs and really start to drive them down? Anybody have any ideas here? Let me see if I can get this right. So we can see it all. Not big enough. Okay. So we have almost like a first pass at the budget, then we can have an adjusted budget. Let's start with the income side of things. What's available? Lindsay, let me ask you, is there anything you could do to your income in this situation?
I would suppose the only thing that you can do to your income is reduce the amount that you put in your 401k savings, but I don't think that's necessarily smart.
Right. How about another job?
Yeah.
Yep. If you get another job, you have less time to spend the money on the other stuff.
Right, right. Maybe a weekend work. I know some guys who kind of combine their hobbies with the second job. Guys who like sports become referees, right? Things like that. When you can find another job that is doing something you really enjoy, you know, it probably doesn't feel like work so much. But that would be one way to do it, is to work more, okay? There's other ways to do it. How about you focus on these expenses? What comes to mind for you here?
Definitely
Lindsay?
the clothing.
No, pardon?
The clothing, taking that expense down.
Okay, yeah.
$400 a month on new clothes is quite a bit.
All right. One of the things that happens here is that most of the workplaces have gone like business casual. It's not necessarily that you have a different wardrobe for when you're at work and when you're not at work, right? That whole business casual play, I think, in general has brought clothing costs down.
Yeah, because even like dry cleaning and stuff, most of even the more dressy business casual stuff, or the, what is it called? I forget what the next level up, like sportswear or
Sure.
sport coat
Sure.
and all that. even the those type of clothing, you know, but they're different for men and women as well. The
Right.
other thing with dry cleaning, you could actually do your own dry cleaning at home. There's new kits and stuff that you can buy, which can reduce that. You can do your
Yeah,
own dry cleaning right in your dryer.
absolutely. I used to always send my business shirts out to the dry cleaner to have them laundered. That's nothing more than putting them in the laundry and ironing them yourself, right?
Yeah.
There's a number of different things that you guys can do. So the clothing, dry cleaning, I think, is an area. What other areas would you guys consider?
So I'll give you a personal example.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I know I'm
please.
not a high school student anymore, but when I got my first job,
Yeah,
it was exactly what you said at the beginning is like, I didn't think of it that way. I guess I wanted to show myself that I was, you know, out there balling with the job.
sure.
So coming right out of college and then getting a sports car with a car payment
Yeah,
was actually kind of like super expensive. However, if I was, you know, if I were to rethink those things again, I would maybe find a way to either buy something more affordable that was transportation but not like flashy. Like I didn't
yeah,
need a sports car. I didn't need a, you know, fast zoom because my
yeah,
insurance went up, right? Because you have in
sure.
that bucket, you
Yeah,
buy a $25,000 car, but you also have to buy insurance equal to that, which is very expensive. Car insurance is very expensive. And if you don't
yes,
have parents or guardians or an adult that you can go on their policy,
yeah,
that's also budgeted at 200 and some dollars a month. So out of that car transportation thing, you're
yeah,
really only looking at being able to buy a $200, $300 a month car payment anyway, which isn't
right.
right. So then I would maybe evaluate mass transit, finding a job on a train line, bus line. I
Yeah,
mean, this is very difficult, Mike. I mean, you're making it sound, you know, easier, but I'm so glad you're talking about this because transportation alone is a budget killer
yes, it is, Mike. Yeah, sure is.
for
And
me
those are,
because car guy, but
yeah, yeah. And those insurance payments are really difficult when you're under 25, right? 25 is when you kind of, the insurance companies think you're a little bit more mature, responsible, and they lower rates. So a new car early is very difficult. Good point. Transportation is a killer. Um, what other things can be done? The things I think about is I pay too much money on cable TV. I don't think I have to uh, pay that. And some of you, I think younger people, are more comfortable with moving from cable to a streaming service, right?
yeah,
Uh,
that's definitely a win there.
mhm. There's also budget phone deals, right? Some
Well,
of you
another
guys,
thing, Mike, they
yeah,
could do for
please.
internet is like certain carriers have,
Yeah,
um, I think they're called hotspots or mobile, like your
yeah,
phone can also be your internet.
yeah,
And so the other thing with the utilities is I think like even me, I invest in a good phone, but that costs me hundreds of dollars a month just for the phone part alone.
right.
But if I was on a budget, I probably would still prioritize having a good smartphone.
Yeah,
But then that smartphone would probably be my internet and everything else. And I would want to be able to tether or make a Wi-Fi hotspot off of it and share that data plan. So, you
right.
know, it's an investment. I would get rid of cable, but I would maybe stream or figure out how to Chromecast or something without internet. And yeah, something there, but I would definitely drill down and
Yeah,
because
yeah,
you have utilities, but like if you're talking about paying rent too, right? Shelter,
yeah.
that do you have like um, electricity, heating, air conditioning in that $1,500? Is that included in that?
Yeah, a lot of these places now take some of the cost of utilities and include that in the piece. A lot of them, I think, cover heat, but not electricity. And if you're in a big apartment building, those utility bills can come down a lot. So in the utilities, I generally had 100 for cable, 100 for utilities, or 75 for utilities, 100 for phone, was the thinking behind it. But it could be higher than that. It could be lower. There are some ways to drive these costs down, and I think you're describing some of them, right? So what's the other consideration? Your biggest expense is what? Is shelter, right? What else could you do? $1,500 a month is pretty high.
You could get a roommate.
Yeah. If you move this to a 2-bedroom place, maybe that amount goes down by $600, let's say, right? $500 or $600. That's real savings for you guys, right? So there's ways that, you know, you could take this same budget and let's just run through here and see what happens. Let's say you're still in this area where your income is set at what it is. But now what we're going to do is we're going to start to see what a roommate would do to our expenses. Maybe that brings that down to 900, or let's say 1,000 a month. Maybe we can shave off $75 off our utility bill. Maybe we can buy a slightly used car, or a used car, or a more modest model, and be able to shave a few $100s off there. Food costs at home, generally, you could squeeze that a little bit, but I think this one is the opportunity to squeeze a little more, right? If you can really watch how you're going out to eat instead of, you know, 4 or 5 times a week, then maybe make it 2 or 3. And let's say you drop that cost down. And then your clothing cost, you could get down to say $250. And then your hobbies, you don't have to give those up. And then your insurance are going to be similar. And then all of a sudden, you've got some money that you can work with every month that could go towards these other important pieces. The savings account for emergencies, go towards education if you have kids or you have some additional schooling you need, or towards investing. Okay.
Yeah. Because if I had that much money left over in my budget, like let's say it tweaks out to be 500 overage, I would still put an extra 250 away for that rainy day. Or,
Yeah.
you know, we're talking about maybe if you buy a car,
Yeah.
right, you're reducing that, you could put that extra part of that car payment away
Yeah.
to upgrade your car later, because even a car is disposable, right? And
Totally with you.
you know, you might need to buy a new car in 2 or 3 years, because if you are an IT technology person and you start out making 55,000 because you went to the BDPAs, you participated in the NSBs or whatever, and you took all those Metro State computer science and the, you know, St. Paul College and all that, you probably are going to get a better car, and you're probably going to prepare, and you know, maybe you'll raise a family, so you won't need a 2-seater sports car like I did, and you're going to need a minivan, right, or that SUV. So it's kind of, this is really incredible conversation. Keep going, Mike. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm pretty excited because it even helps me as an adult to remind me how to budget, how to make sure that you're thinking about the whole picture.
Yeah, right. It is absolutely true, and it is what many people do. I know people who budget their expenses. even at my age, monthly budgets, they're watching this thing very closely. Season that to your own individual taste, but the idea of watching your money and where it goes is really important. It's just too easy to spend it all up, and that credit card trap is it flip out the plastic, swipe it, I'll pay the minimum amount next month and I can do it again next week, right? So this is the kind of thing that we get, is really important. I have friends, some of them have really expensive cars. I have friends who, Corolla, Civic, Ford Escape, throughout their life is going to be a more modest car with a more modest payment. So these are the types of things that we're faced with making choices on. And I think the other thing, the last thing that I add is, be careful about judging a book by its cover. There are people out there with a lot of fancy things that may be upside down financially. It's easy to be in that place. So all of these ideas that we talked about are ways in which we can really act like a manager and drive our costs down. And I think it's really helpful for you to maybe see it and think about it in your own personal life. So I'm going to wrap it up with that comment there, and just say once again how much I've enjoyed these series and working with Mike on this. And hope all of y'all are doing well, and please reach out if you have any additional questions. Before I go, Mike, are there questions?
No, Lindsay, take it away. Do we have any questions out there? I know there was, Kelly had said something about reducing like your eating and your dining out. And then I guess these are all individual choices, right? That you have to decide what's your priority. The other thing is, students look at their health, and certain foods I found that when you budget, and of course I based on my recent health kick, right?
Sure.
Is that to eat properly, and you're starting out in your home life, cooking and learning to cook and to buy groceries should be a priority versus going out to eat, because you're going to spend 10, 15, 20 bucks on a burger, fries, and yeah, it's social and everything like that, but you can cook that same thing for $6. And you're going to find that groceries and prioritizing how you manage your life is even a bigger challenge too, Mike. I think your social, social aspect, especially coming out of COVID, right? So everybody's like cooped up wanting to get out and go wild. But the reality of it is, it's going to be really important to learn to cook and to learn to do a lot more home-based things and enjoy things differently than maybe you were accustomed to. So Kelly, if you want to offer anything else, I think deciding where you spend your budget, and I think that's what you're saying, and we're congruent on that topic.
Right.
Yeah, it's saving money there. So Lindsay, any other questions that you can think of that come to mind?
Nothing that come to mind for me, and there are no other further questions in the chat box.
Okay.
Could we look at the appeal to insurance company document that Kim posted, or if Kim is there, could you tell us what's in there? Hi, Kim, are you there?
I'm here. I'm not sure exactly what I posted. I'm having some issues with my computer.
Okay, sure.
I
Don't worry.
posted, what did you say it is?
It looks like a Word document that says appeal to insurance company.
Oh, well, I didn't mean to post that. Let's see here. I don't even know how to get back to the screen. Something is going on here with my.
It's okay.
All right.
It's
Make the
okay.
screen bigger. Oh, there we go. Okay, there we go. I'm not quite sure what that is. Oh, shoot.
I'm
Well,
going
then
to take a guess, and it's something worthwhile. Maybe it's certainly worth a phone call.
I think it's one of my documents. How in the world did I do that? Okay. I don't know how I did that, Mike, but I just want to say thank you guys so much. I guess, delete that document. I don't know how I could delete it.
Sure, sure. I'm sure Mike can take care of it. It is a good document though, because I do ask my insurance agent once a year, can you save me money? And sometimes I even a price comparison. I always go to Geico and I say, hey, here's what Geico is offering. Can you match it? Right? So it's another way that we can save our money. So it's a very helpful way to think about this as well.
Yeah.
But with that, I'll call it a day.
I think that's really important. Can y'all hear me?
Yep.
Sure.
Oh, okay. I think it's really important that each year that we do look at our insurance and contact the insurance company. I know that I have saved thousands of dollars by doing that. Each year I call for my home insurance and my auto and motorcycle insurance. And I have saved anywhere from $400 to $700 per year in savings by just contacting and just letting them run the numbers.
Good, good.
And Dr. Wilson, Kim is somebody who I really am fond of. She rides motorcycles, her and her family, and she actually does financial planning and services for young and old.
Okay.
But since we weren't, one of our upcoming series would be focusing purely around finance. I'm glad, Kim, that you picked this up. We just haven't had a time to get out to everybody, but you're definitely on our list. The other thing that I wanted to say, Mike, real briefly, and I know that we could go on and forever, because this is a really, big topic, but also just going back and looking at how you spend money. And I've lost a specific example that I was going to give, but no, I didn't. I remembered it. But when you're a high school student, you're 18 years old, and you graduate, and I apologize if I missed this, and you have a parent or guardian who is working for a company, right? They work for a corporation or they work for a big, monolithic company, and they get health benefits, right? One of the biggest misnomers that I've seen is a lot of, and this actually came up in a totally unrelated conversation, but the adult didn't understand in totality how their own health insurance worked. And it made a lot of sense to me, because when I started working, I just signed up for everything because I didn't know any better. My mom worked and all that. But legally, a dependent, if you're living in the home and there's other requirements, like let's say you live to cut your housing out and you're able to live at home, on your parents' health insurance, they can add you for an incremental cost. So let's say if you went out and bought a health insurance policy for yourself, like you bought Obamacare, right? Or whatever, and it costs you $200 a month. But you asked your parent or guardian to put you on their policy, which they legally can until either age 24 or age 26, and using your home residence, but it only costs them an extra $50 a month. It would make sense for you to pay your parents $50 a month and have them go on your policy, or maybe trade it off for some other kind of work at home, right? Or some other thing. So the net win out of that is you're saving $150 a month to go towards that next investment. Maybe you're gonna invest in a townhome or a house, a small house. These are all the strategic type of investments that you can make as a high school person. And if you think about how Dr. Wilson has shared this information with you, it becomes absolutely critical if you're about your game, right? If you want to go out there and have a lot of fun and wild out and truly enjoy it. And I have to tell you, I'd be hypocritical if I didn't tell you I didn't do it. But I also didn't have Dr. Wilson to share his wisdom with us, right? Or Ms. Pruitt or Lindsay here to share their experiences. So, just keep in mind to the high school students that it's actually critical that, whatever you pick up from this conversation, Dr. Wilson is on point. And it's really just to get you to think how you can manage your own financial future. Because if you did things right, according to what you want to do, at the end of the day, you can't complain about where you're at. So if you go in and you spend your check up, every single check, you have nothing left because you rented a motorcycle, you were out all the time eating at the best restaurants, or you bought a lot of expensive things, you know, instead of buying, you know, let's say a decent $50 to $100 pair of tennis shoes, you go and buy $250, you know, LeBrons or whatever it is. You know, just remember at the end of the day, you have nobody to blame but you, because you have an opportunity to control your financial destiny. Because being a technology person coming out of programs that you're going to excel at and getting a job, your smart move is to try to bank that money, not just ball out, right? And so that's the only thing, Mike, really that I have to say before we close is that, you know, we appreciate you, Power Up IT. This has been an incredible series. Next week we have, you know, what's the strategy, what's the future, what's the impact of COVID on technology and manufacturing. Mike, can you share just a real brief summary of that topic so we can make sure our guests in the repeat will be able to participate in that?
Right. So this topic, which is coming together, is a result of a number of different factors that are at play in the workplace right now. Many people describe our position as a fourth industrial revolution, where it's gone beyond the idea of automating things. And now a big emphasis on artificial intelligence, a big emphasis on data analytics. And that's going to have a lot of repercussions for the work that's being done or will be done. Some people view that with a certain amount of fear, like it's going to take my job, but it certainly will create a lot more opportunities. And what we're going to talk about next week is where we see some of those opportunities developing. It's a prediction, it's a model. It may not be right, but it certainly will give you guys something to think about. So that's our goal for next week.
All right, thank you for that. And from Dr. Wolf and I here at Power Up IT, we thank everyone for joining us. Next week will be our last professional development session, and we will be talking with Steve Buchanan this Thursday at the same time, 11:30 a.m. Thank you, everyone.